I've never been the kind of person who flaunts money. Maybe that's because for most of my life, I didn't have any. I grew up in a small Midwestern town where people fix things instead of replacing them, and birthdays meant homemade cake, not parties with rented bouncy castles. My parents worked hard, but we were barely middle class. I was used to hearing my mom say, "We can't afford that right now, honey." So when I finally made it out, built a business from scratch, and found success, I never really changed that part of me. I stayed humble, drove an old truck for years, and kept quiet about what I had. My wife's family was the complete opposite. Old money, private schools, family summer homes, and names engraved on country club plaques. When I met her in college, she didn't seem like them. She was kind, down to earth, and told me she didn't care about money. We fell in love fast. When I proposed, her family wasn't thrilled. They were polite, but I could feel the judgment. Her dad once said, "You're a nice kid, but she's used to a certain lifestyle." I smiled through it. I thought I could win them over with respect, consistency, and love. For a while, everything seemed fine. I worked long hours, built my startup, and by some miracle and a lot of sleepless nights, it took off. But I never bragged about it. I still wore the same clothes, still kept things simple. My wife knew, of course. She had access to our accounts and saw the lifestyle we could live, but she liked keeping things quiet too, or so I thought. Then came the family meeting. Every year, her family does this big reunion on her grandparents' estate. Picture something out of a movie: wine tastings, formal dinners, private chefs, the whole 9 yards. I always felt out of place, but I went to support my wife. This year, though, the tension was different. It started with small comments. Her cousin, who sells real estate, made a joke about how some people just marry up to get ahead. Her mom chuckled. Her brother asked if I was still doing that little tech thing. I tried to laugh it off, but it stung. When her uncle, a banker, said, "At least you've got ambition, even if you don't have assets," the room laughed like it was all harmless fun. My wife didn't say a word. That's when her grandmother spoke up. The woman is like the family matriarch. Everyone listens to her. She looked right at me and said, "It's admirable that you try, dear, but you really should think about stability. My granddaughter needs someone who can provide for her future." I wish I could say I stayed calm. I didn't. Something in me snapped. I'd spent years working like a dog, taking risks, investing smart, and building something from nothing. I wasn't angry that they thought I was poor. I was angry that my wife sat there and let them humiliate me. I stood up, thanked them for dinner, and told my wife I'd wait outside. On my way out, her cousin whispered, "Guess he couldn't handle the truth." What none of them knew was that earlier that day, I had flown in from a business trip on my own helicopter. I usually keep it at a nearby airfield, but I'd arranged for it to pick me up later that night since we had to head back to the city the next morning. As I walked across the lawn, I heard the distant sound of the blades cutting through the sky. Then came the look on their faces. The laughter from inside faded as the sound grew louder. A few people came outside, probably to see what was going on. My wife followed, looking confused. The helicopter touched down near the far end of the property. The pilot hopped out, opened the door, and waved me over. I didn't say a word. Her brother was the first to speak. "Whose is that?" I looked at him and said, "Mine." The silence that followed was something I'll never forget. Her father's smirk vanished. Her grandmother looked like she'd swallowed her drink wrong. My wife's eyes darted between me and the helicopter, like she was realizing for the first time that she'd never really known just how far I'd come. The pilot walked over and handed me a tablet. "Sir, your flight plan's ready." Her uncle stammered, You own that thing?" I nodded. "And 5 others. I've been building an aviation logistics company for the past few years. That little tech thing you all keep joking about? It's doing fine." I wasn't trying to flex. I was hurt, deeply hurt. And at that moment, the truth just came out sharper than I intended. I told them that while they were sitting around judging people by last names and summer homes, I was out there actually building something real. I told them I didn't need to prove myself to anyone, least of all to people who measured worth by inheritance. Then I turned to my wife. "You should have defended me," I said quietly. "You knew what they were saying was wrong." She tried to speak, but I just shook my head. I climbed into the helicopter and left. That flight was one of the loneliest hours of my life. I stared out the window, watching the lights below blur through the tears I didn't want to admit were there. I wasn't crying because of the insults. I'd heard worse. I was crying because I realized that the woman I loved had let them make me feel small. When I landed back in the city, I checked into a hotel. My phone blew up with calls and messages from my wife. She apologized over and over, said she didn't know they'd go that far, said she was embarrassed. But it was too late. The damage was done. We didn't talk for 3 days. When she finally came home, she looked exhausted. She told me her family couldn't stop talking about the helicopter, how suddenly everyone was impressed, and how her dad wanted to discuss potential partnerships. I laughed. Not out of joy, but disbelief. The same people who mocked me a few hours earlier were now trying to benefit from me. I told her I didn't care about their approval. What mattered was that when it counted, she stayed silent. She said she froze, that she didn't know what to say. Maybe that's true. But when you love someone, you fight for them even when your voice shakes. She didn't. We're still together for now. We're in therapy, trying to figure things out. I still love her, but I can't unhear those words. I can't forget the way it felt to be laughed at in front of people who didn't even know me. Funny thing is, I never wanted revenge. I just wanted respect. But ever since that night, I've noticed a shift. Her family now treats me differently. Polite, overly nice, even flattering. It's almost worse than the insults. At least before, I knew where I stood. Now it's all fake smiles and backhanded compliments. I've stopped going to their events. My wife goes alone sometimes, and I don't stop her. But when she gets back, I can tell it's different. She looks at me the way people look at something they don't quite understand anymore. Maybe she's proud. Maybe she's scared. Maybe both. I didn't plan for any of this to happen. I just wanted to be seen for who I am, not what I own. But that night changed everything, not just how they saw me, but how I saw them. And maybe, if I'm being honest, how I saw her too. I still replay that evening in my head sometimes. The laughter, the looks, the sound of those blades slicing through the air. For a brief moment, I thought that sound meant vindication. Now I realize it just marked the end of something much quieter, much more fragile. Trust. And once that's gone, all the money in the world can't buy it back.